So you've heard about Bitcoin and it works with blockchain, but do you know about Ethereum? And have you considered decentralization? How about DAOs in your data, DeFi, open source software, crypto Twitter, E2.0, Mt. Gox stacks, sidechains, state channels, consensus mechanisms?
Welcome to Square One, a place to deepen your crypto knowledge.
Sweet. Hey everybody, I'm here with Cooper Turley, the man who is really, he's one of like the leading NFT thinkers and sort of coordinators within the crypto space right now. And I've had the pleasure of hanging out with Cooper in Paris previously. We're both members of the Meta Cartel, which is how we really connected. And yeah, and so Cooper, would you mind just kind of giving a bit of a background on where you're coming from and how you entered the crypto space?
Sure. So I've always been very entrepreneurial in spirit. I was selling Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards in high school. I went to school for music business and kind of fell in love with that vertical for quite a long time. I was traveling the world, going to music festivals, doing journalism and artist interviews. I thought at that time that's what I wanted to do for a career, but I quickly realized that there was a pretty distinct ceiling in what I could do financially. And so I kind of fell into crypto as a nice way to pursue that entrepreneurial route, but also be very explorative in terms of different sectors and disciplines. And so the past 4 years, I've really just been working with different communities, trying to better understand what it means to build super fans. And, now with NFTs, I think we're finding that working its way back to music. So it's been really nice for me to be able to, connect those two passions and work on something that I really love.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think one thing that definitely drives your ability to be an effective coordinator is is that human element, that connection, and your exuberance around the passion that you have for this space and the work that you're doing and the people that you're doing it with, which I really think is also something that's relatively unique to the crypto space specifically, is that we are surrounded by people who are very inspiring. And in a lot of ways, the technology that we're building here does have a bit of a philosophy built into it, and sort of that attracts these kinds of like-minded individuals.
Totally. I mean, it's positive sum by default, right? I think there's a lot of other industries where you're taught to keep things close to the chest, to keep secrets close, to have people sign NDAs, et cetera, et cetera. But, crypto is really collaborative. And I think part of the reason why I fell in love with the DAO space and Meta Cartel is that everyone was very free about sharing ideas, like really pushing the cutting edge on what needed to happen and kind of growing as an ecosystem rather than worrying about, how does my project outcompete yours? It was just like, we're all in this together. I think it's a positive sum game. And if we work together to kind of build a better industry, it's going to make a better world. And so that's kind of the ethos that I approach all my work with. I touch a lot of projects, but I'm always very open and sort of team agnostic. I think that this is an industry for everyone to kind of win together in. And I love to try and share as much of those information, resources, and connections as I can.
Totally. That's amazing. Okay, so since this is a bit of this is a podcast about that's hoping to bring people who don't have a lot of context for crypto into the space and have a relatively clear and deep understanding of the actual fundamental technology available. I guess I'm curious, what would be that base intuition and understanding that people sort of need to have in order to begin participating within the ecosystem?
Yeah, I'll start with the mindset. I think that one of the amazing things about crypto is if you contribute value to a product or service, you deserve to be compensated for that. In the world today, we use things like Instagram and Spotify every day, but we don't really think a lot about what are we getting in return from that? I think there's a lot of social value to be earned from, getting likes and followers on Instagram, but financially speaking, these companies are making billions of dollars on the back of our data. And so rethinking that and sort of being in control of the value you create and being rewarded for that value, I think that primitive is really powerful and kind of why crypto, just as a general principle, is different from the industries that have preceded us. I would say more generally than that, recognizing that having ownership over your assets and being able to make more intuitive financial decisions on a social level. I think that we don't think a lot about sending people payments on Venmo or doing public transactions or anything like that. But there's this really cool, collaborative investment ecosystem forming where you and your friends can get together, share capital, and do exciting things. And I think NFTs are just one conduit of that, where artists are going direct to fans. They're realizing they don't need a label to be able to monetize on the back of their super fans. And we're now trying to see all these experiments where so long as you have something meaningful to share, there's probably going to be a buyer out there for it. And it's just a matter of finding a good marketplace to surface that.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I love that that community ownership aspect of the space, that we're allowed and able to leverage crypto and digital ownership of networks essentially, to benefit each other and make collective decisions and form more of a grassroots organizational structure, which is completely novel and really the thing that Bitcoin and Ethereum broke ground for, I think. Could we also? I mean, most people probably won't have an understanding of NFTs. I'm sure you've done this 100,000 times because of the work that you have been participating with most recently, and the crazy explosion of NFTs lately. Could you give a brief summary, like what is an NFT?
Yeah, an NFT to me is a scarce digital asset. In the same way that you can upload a post to Instagram, you can now upload that directly to the blockchain. And by doing that, you have a limited version of it. So NFTs is short for non-fungible token. The way that I like to think of this is you could trade anybody another dollar. You can exchange $1 one for one, but you would never trade someone's car with your car because they have inherently different properties. There's different makes and models. And that's kind of what happens with NFTs. You have assets that exist entirely digitally, but they have unique properties. And because of that, they're able to be valued differently and kind of have, unique markets and collectors around them.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that is a very concise answer. It makes a lot of sense. And further, I guess I'm curious, what do you feel like is kind of exciting in the space right now? I mean, everything's been exploding. But what is the next step? I guess, well, first, where are we right now? So we have like NFTs, right, that are being launched. People just sold a $70 million NFT 2 weeks ago, that through Christie's, right, that like broke the internet. There are community tokens that are launching that have these token economies around either creators or anonymous like community leaders or people who want to create some sort of mission or goal. Actually, could we dig into a little bit of like an example of that, like maybe with FWB?
Yeah, so FWB is a culture crypto community. Basically there's a lot of different areas to explore with crypto and beyond crypto, the future of technology. And what we did is create a Discord group. We need to hold a little bit of tokens to have access to this server. And within that server, you just have, communication channels with some of the brightest minds in the space. It's nothing too crazy. It's not like you're using your tokens every day, but having that little skin in the game where someone has to go out of their way and figure out how to get tokens in a MetaMask wallet, it's kind of a high enough wall that when you participate in those conversations, that you're talking to people basically at the cutting edge. And in my opinion, that allows for some of the most exciting conversations to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I'm curious, like, what is it about FWB? How has that been successful? What kind of mechanisms have they used to really drive a meaningful community out of their token economy?
I think it's more about the people that are in that group. For me, when I first discovered the community, I had been deep in crypto for many years at that point. A lot of the times when I was joining a new chat group, I would see familiar faces. I would see the usual suspects that were speculating on all of these tokens. But when I went into FWB, it was a completely new audience. There was a bunch of people I had never met before talking about music, art, technology, like just these kind of like wide, ambitious ideas. And when I saw that, I immediately started thinking like, wow, it's not about the price of this token. It's not about how many tokens you need to get in here. It's about the value of these conversations. And I think the reason it's been so successful is that word of mouth nature of kind of focusing on the quality of community has allowed there to be some really amazing conversations. And what we see now is this really vast server of different topics and disciplines. So you'll see an NFT chat, a social token chat, a DeFi chat, people trading options, people talking about mental health, right? And basically like any cool topic that there is to discuss, FWB is kind of this home base where you can have safe conversations in a digital age with people that have shared skin in the game with you.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, and I think that to me, I think that so something that happened in 2017 where all these ICOs came about, there was a bunch of these business models that had all these like really amazing, brilliant, groundbreaking ideas, and ultimately most of that technology there didn't hold any water. There was actually a bunch of people who were ideating without really understanding the deep technical software and infrastructure that needed to be built in order for their ideas to come to fruition, where most of these token economies kind of launched and then didn't have a lot of actual value, very similar to the dot-com boom, right, in the 90s. And the thing that I see as probably being the most used, there's, I guess, two sides of the most used and valuable sectors currently within the industry. One will be DeFi, of course. I think like, and that came about with Wi-Fi and the DeFi summer this last fall. And then the second that was kind of to some extent kind of quiet underneath that was the social token, the rise of social tokens, and essentially community permissioned token chat rooms, and and these communities that have skin in the game. They're kind of a level up from the Moloch DAO ecosystem and organizations like that, because you don't have to. Well, I mean, they are and they aren't. They're a little bit more fluid, I guess, mainly because you don't have to go through that membership process, etc.
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts there. I think the first one is that ideating on crypto is a really fun thing to do. You know, I literally do this as a living with some friends through a DAO called Fire Eyes. We work with teams on token and governance design. But what I've noticed is that the further you ideate, the more nuance you open up. And so for a lot of these token ecosystems, I've come to terms with realizing just holding tokens get into a chat group is actually an extremely complicated thing. And I think we're all so far down the rabbit hole that we try and think about staking, delegation, curation, all these crazy Ponzi games to play. But like most people don't even know how to add a custom token to their MetaMask wallet, you know? And like when you start to think of that, I think someone holding tokens to get into a Discord server, like that is a light bulb moment. And we need to recognize that that's okay. And that's kind of the vein that we need to build in. What I'd kind of say to your point about like the fluidity of social tokens, it's my belief that social tokens are the next thing after NFTs. You know, I think that NFTs are very ephemeral and they offer a cool collectible experience, but you know, these fluid ecosystems where everyone can have shared skin in the game, you can enter and exit an ecosystem as you please, and you can kind of have a token that has a financial value. I think that there is some dangerous ground there, but like at its core, you know, rewarding early members for holding a token that ends up doing well. I think that that primitive is really exciting and something that separates it drastically from, you know, the non-fungible shares that we saw in the DAO world a couple of years ago.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. Also, I'm curious. This is kind of bridging into that non-fungible shares. But how did you begin? How did you actually join Metacartel? Was it? Yeah, I'm curious about that story. I think it's a decent one.
Yeah, so I was traveling the world going to a bunch of crypto conferences and had no blockchain friends. You know, it was me and maybe one of my colleagues just going to some random conference in Thailand for like the stupidest blockchain events you could think of, like, you know, Bitcoin, you know, I won't name other projects by name, but just like weird events. And then I somehow stumbled into like these Ethereum developer conferences and really just fell in love with it. You know, I saw that it was no longer a trade show where people were at a booth shilling their token. There was people actually there like building products and services, and that was really exciting to me. And so it was at Japan DevCon that I kind of like first heard about Metacartel, like vaguely, but I just kind of had it in the peripherals. And then a few weeks later at ETH SF was when I actually met up with Alex Mazmej. She was hosting an event that Audius was speaking at, where I work now. Ave was speaking at. My friend James Watt was speaking there. A couple other projects. And I just immediately fell in love with sort of like the philosophy behind what those presentations stood for, like user adoption, like getting through all these barriers that we have. Sat down and chatted with James Watt the next day and just immediately like fell in love with this community that he was talking about. And so at that time, I did not have a lot of money in crypto. You know, to me, 10 ETH was like a ton of money, and there was no way that I was going to be able to like give that to a DAO to just give away to people. Like that was something that meant a lot to me. And so I just chose to work my way in. You know, I saw that there was a story to be told, and I started interviewing a bunch of different members of Metacartel, you know, helping to evangelize the DAO on Twitter and really just like branch out and give it a spotlight. And I think by putting in that active effort to be like, hey, I really care about this community and I want to contribute to it, you know, I was lucky enough to get voted in a share that kind of gave me a seat at the table to go and contribute.
Yeah, that's super awesome. And I think that your story is one that many probably wouldn't expect coming from such a technical industry. And I remember this being kind of in some ways one of your calling cards. Is like, you can do this, you can add value without being technical in the crypto industry. There's like tons of ways to be an efficient and productive teammate without having any knowledge of Solidity or even software development specifically, right?
Yeah.
Because of the amount of coordination that's required for these systems to function.
Totally. And I think that's why I've gravitated so much towards this NFT and social token area, is because it's very creative. It's very collaborative. Like those human skills are very highly valued. And specifically for things like FWB, you know, like the most valuable contributors are not developers. They're people that own bakeries and coffee shops, and have worked with humans for a very long time. And now that we live in a digital world, having people to coordinate and draw attention and kind of keep the conversation exciting, like that's kind of an intangible quality that I think every project in crypto is starting to realize is extremely valuable and that they need to start accounting for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's super true. And the extent to which this technology is both technical but also deeply human, I think is a big piece of why that is so valuable as well. It is a coordination effort, and there's this concept of DAOs, and I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are great DAOs for computers. And ultimately there are people behind those that are like managing and helping the computers like participate within the network. But the actual concept of a DAO will ultimately also really incentivize humans to do acts and do things, right? Like that's the ultimate goal in some ways, is create incentive systems for human coordination, and that communication layer, that social layer, is a like key piece of that actually functioning, and ever actually like getting off of the ground.
Yeah, and this is kind of why DeFi was so attractive to me, because I'm not a financial person at heart. Like I studied accounting for like a year in college and like just never was too excited by like the financial primitives of the world. But this concept of yield farming where you put in some form of value and you earn tokens in return, like that primitive I think is so exciting. And you look at platforms like Audius today where there's artists contributing songs to a platform and earning streams. Like these financial actions don't have to be the only way that you can earn from contributing to an ecosystem. We mentioned like writing, communicating, project management, like uploading songs, like all of these actions are really valuable. And I think for me, seeing that there was systems in place where the most valuable contributors of any disciplines can be rewarded for that with tokens that have financial value, like it really opens up a ton of mercenary design space where it's no longer about like, who is the main company paying my salary? It's like, what project or creator is most interesting to me and how can I add value to their brand or lifestyle? And in doing so, I'm going to be able to earn a piece of the pie that sets me up pretty nicely for the future.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that's really awesome. Actually, I'm curious because you brought it up. I'm curious, like, can you describe your involvement with the Wi-Fi? And also that was in a lot of ways that kind of was one of the thing that kicked off yield farming. And I think yield farming is also a concept that most people, that's like a deeply technical thing that most people won't understand until they're like, they're able to add a custom token to their MetaMask wallet. So maybe we could get into that for a second.
Yeah, for sure. I'll say that Wi-Fi definitely popularized the term yield farming, right? Like right. Up until that point, there was a lot of opportunities. Like Synthetics was doing like quote unquote yield farming. Nexus Mutual was kind of doing this too, but it was a little bit more low key. When Wi-Fi launched and there was this opportunity to farm tokens with like 5,000% APY or higher, like that's when it kind of became a thing where it was like, holy shit, I can put my capital somewhere, get tokens in return. And this is like the most lucrative use of tokens ever. And so for me, had watched Yearn for a long time. Obviously, they were an early member of Metacartel, had just been kind of around the ecosystem. And at that point, I was writing very actively for this blog called Defi Rate, where I was basically just keeping my ear on the ground, watching out for any exciting developments that happened. And pretty low key, Andre just in typical fashion put out a blog post being like, hey, I'm making this token soon, not hyping it up at all. And I kind of picked that up and wrote a story about it and just like broke down the Yearn ecosystem, talked about what the token was, what it was going to do. He reciprocated some love on that. And so I had it on my radar. And then I remember very vividly, it was the same morning as the MTA Mesa sale. And everyone in DeFi had their attention pointed at this like reverse Dutch auction because it was so oversubscribed and stuff. And then I was like, there's this token called Wi-Fi trading over here. Like, what is this thing? Like I started like buying it on Balancer with like 10% slippage at like $70 a token. And I was like, all right, like what is going on? Like, this is crazy. Like no one was talking about it. I was like, okay, cool. I can like lock my tokens and get more. Like this is super exciting. And so while it was really cool to be able to like discover it really naturally, I quickly realized that the communication channels around it just didn't exist, right? Like it was a pure degens game where you had to be like a literal expert to be able to get it in the first place. And so I stepped up to help, in those very early days, just help with coordination, set up the governance forum to have a lot of those early discussions and acted as one of the earlier signers on the project, just to help take some of the like rug pullness off of Andre, despite the fact that that was never a concern. I think the community was very quick to say like, oh, there's hundreds of millions of dollars here. Like this guy could run away if he wanted to. And so, me and a couple other people just stepped up to help in that regard. And it was fun. Like it was really exciting. And like you said, like that was kind of the center stage of where like DeFi yield farming was like the thing. and like finding the best yield was like the thing to do in crypto. So being able to have like an early seat at the table, and granted, my role was super small. I didn't do a lot. I signed some transactions here and there, contributed to a governance forum, like helped post educational resources about it. But going back to our earlier point, it's not only about the deeply financial ways these systems exist. Like you need people to help spread those messages and kind of champion that information outwardly. And that was kind of the role that I was lucky to play in those early days of the project.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, to me, that was, to me, that was like the rise of the DeFi summer that like sparked the DeFi summer. But that was also like the rise of like Cooper Turley in a lot of ways.
True.
Like that really put some boosters on your your influence within the ecosystem. And despite, I think that's very humble for you to say that, you didn't do too much, like signed a few transactions. I know how many hours it also, I'm sure you spent building the governance forum and creating these structures and communicating with random degens to try and corral them and kind of get them to understand what's going on. Because that's definitely thankless work. And as can be seen by like Andre's posts.
Totally. And thank you for saying that. I will say that like governance is a really exciting topic, but no one likes to do it. I've always tried to be very forward about helping people understand there's a lot to be earned from being an active governance participant, like both on a social and a financial level. As you just alluded to, my participation in Wi-Fi early on was a huge boost for my social career, right? Like it got me a lot of followers on Twitter. I was able to get a lot more influence because of that. And then since then, I've been able to parlay that into doing a lot of like client work for DeFi teams, and actually getting paid a substantial amount of money to help contribute to governance. And this is something that is not going to go away anytime soon. And in the absence of human mindshare to actually participate in governance, like these teams want to, frankly, bankroll people to just come and contribute, right? And I think there's less than like 1,000 people in the world that participate in governance in like a very meaningful way. And so for those that are able to learn about it and say, hey, I really like this project, I think this is how you could improve your system, you make a proposal to the community, like there's a lot of upside to be gained from kind of taking that, thread the needle and going through a path to kind of be paid for the work that you want to contribute to any ecosystem.
That's a great point. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's like a new form of gig economy that's being created around the crypto industry that does require significant context. So there is a, despite it being open and available to anyone, there's the barrier to entry is how much have you read and how much do you know, right? And I think the other thing is that it's very easy to have sort of this imposter syndrome within this industry that is so young and seemingly, like uncertain as far as the extent to which the actors that you're working with are legitimate or not, right? Because the underbelly of the crypto industry is this greedy, emotion essentially that's part of human nature that no one can really escape as well. Number go up is a fun, exciting thing for humans, like in general. Even if our best intentions and the mission isn't around that specifically.
Yeah, and this was a big reason why I kind of have transitioned away from DeFi a bit. I by no means want to say that this is the only motivation, because I think DeFi is incredible and there's a lot of amazing teams, but it's all financial, right? It's literally called DeFi, decentralized finance. And I recognize that a lot of the projects I was contributing to, the bottom line was, how do we optimize for yield? How do we make more money? And that's just not what drives me. Like I think working with creators and being more exploratory around the ways that these technologies can kind of optimize creator careers is like exponentially more exciting to me than like, how do I earn a higher return on my stable coins? And so drastically oversimplifying what DeFi is, but I think at its heart, there's a lot of money games being played in that sector. And for me, I loved it. I played those games and still play those games today. But when I thought about where I contribute the most value to the ecosystem, I wanted to find something that, really empowered a new class of creators and kind of allowed people that, one ETH can make or break someone's rent paycheck. And I think in DeFi, we got into a phase where it was like, what's the next comma that you can earn? And I think that just wasn't really vibing with me. So I kind of like a little bit hard pivoted like very strongly into social tokens and NFTs because it was way more up like my alley of what I was driven by and what I'm passionate about.
Totally. No, that makes a ton of sense. Do you want to talk a bit about your work at Audius?
Yeah, so I run crypto strategy at Audius. For those that aren't familiar, this is a decentralized streaming protocol. I like to say that it's SoundCloud with a token underneath of it. And so my work is basically helping people understand what a token is, what it means to own a share in the network, and then creating ways to use that token that don't feel completely alien to new users. So with crypto projects today, we have two types of audiences. We have the deeply educated crypto buyers, people who know what staking is and want to participate in governance. And then you have people who just signed up to listen to music and have never touched Ethereum in their life. And so a big thing of what I do there is basically help to figure out, how do I design like cool systems where like an average artist who's never touched Ethereum can get excited by a token, while also balancing this kind of expectation that the other side of crypto has for, deep understanding of tokenomics, issuance schedules, APYs, all that kind of stuff. And basically just threading that needle. I'm really proud to say that we now have like 4 million monthly active users. This is the most used Ethereum application in the world. And for me, it's been really, really fun to design for a completely new user, because that's something that, in my experience up until now, you were always designing for like experts, basically, right? So taking a step back and thinking about what those use cases were and are today has been like an incredibly fun design space to play around in.
That's super fun. So you're actually onboarding people from like, are people on the Audius platform actually minting tokens? I'm not super familiar. Okay, yeah.
We have the audio platform token, which is basically our governance token. It's basically ownership over the platform. You can't create NFTs or social tokens on Audius today, but what you can do is upload tracks similar to SoundCloud and then earn from those experiences, right? And so I think it's a gradual process. Over time, we'll introduce monetization, we'll introduce like NFT features and social token features. And the way I like to think of Audius is if there's anything cool and exciting happening in crypto that could empower you as an artist, I'm going to find a way to help implement that and allow you to use it to your advantage. And so we recognize that not everyone wants to download MetaMask and dive off the deep end in NFTs, but there are people that are curious. And so we want to bake in like products and features that support those explorations without forcing you to have tokens or any understanding of crypto to start using the platform in the first place.
Nice. That makes a ton of sense. I really like that. And so I guess like for some of the artists that are coming in and maybe want to advance or, take that dive, they'll go to you and be like, yo, like what, how can I start minting my own NFTs? Or I have this idea for my community that I think that, could be cool to interact with on a Discord channel or something like that. They'll go
totally.
and you walk them through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all interrelated. Like this idea of the creator economy is extremely exciting to me. It's where I spend most of my time. With Audius specifically, we introduced this feature called VIP tiers, where similar to social tokens, you hold a certain amount of audio and that gives you a specific badge in the platform. And that badge allows you to access specific features on Audius. And so we kind of abstracted this like Discord only chat thing to basically a generalized streaming protocol. And so we're working on some cool NFT features coming out soon where you need to hold a specific amount of audio to access it. And I think that this new learning that you can hold a share in the network and get benefits like on a user end from that is really exciting. And it's equally more exciting when that token has a financial value and you can come and go as you please. It's no longer about spending $15 a month to keep your tracks on Audius. You can hold tokens so long as you want to use the platform, enjoy all the benefits and features. And if you don't want to use Audius anymore, go ahead and take it to Uniswap. Like, we're not the ones to say whether or not you should have to hold that. And we definitely don't want to make people be beholden to a subscription fee to keep using the platform that they know and love.
Yeah, I love that too. I think that's 100% the future of both subscriptions and like rewards is like holding a piece of that network that someone else has created and supporting them in that way, but then also leaving and potentially profiting from that. I think like it's such a more elegant value exchange than signing up, giving someone your credit card, and then having to email them to remove your credit card from a database, right? Like that's inefficient. But there are a lot of steps that are kind of the hurdles to get to that place where that economy becomes more fluid are relatively significant. And I've been thinking about the UX of blockchain for years now and trying to solve that. And ultimately, I've come to the opinion that we actually just need to change human behavior around the internet, and we need to instill new types of standards for asset management that is crypto related, because there's no way to make this feel like Web 2. Feeling like Web 2 is going back to Coinbase and essentially it's like this bridge. It's a hybrid solution, but it's not quite actually owning your assets and being fully in control of the value that you create.
Yeah, and it's been a fun design space to watch play out, because I do see a lot of value in like the nifty gateways of the world where you can pay with a credit card and sort of dip your toes in without going into the deep end. But when people understand the difference between buying an NFT on Nifty Gateway versus buying one on Zora or SuperAir, like that learning curve is really fascinating. And I think over time, as these tools become more democratized, we're going to see reasons why that's so special to be doing it in a non-custodial manner. And I think the most obvious example of this are retroactive airdrops, right? The fact that you could use a network and earn tokens from that usage of the network that oftentimes are worth far more than whatever time or effort you put into it. Like, that flywheel is incredibly exciting. And I think it's going to be a system that all of the biggest companies of tomorrow are going to use, right? Reward your early users, like create super fans and power users, and like basically just make your community rich. And like by doing that, I think that you see such like a viral army around your project that's why the top 100 crypto projects today are worth more than brand household names that we've heard about for our whole life, because there's just different incentive layers, and people just value them completely different because they actually own the network. Like if there's a brand name that I like, it's like, oh, cool, I recognize them, but I don't give a damn about their bottom line because like I don't get anything from contributing there. But if you're like a user of a platform and you're like, yeah, I fucking love Synthetics, this derivative assets platform that I mint SUSD on. It's like the most convoluted thing ever. But the fact that I own that network, I'm willing to go to bat for it and basically slay anyone that talks shit because I have a huge bag of it, right? And I think that flywheel is like really exciting and will trickle down to like every product that we ever use in the world.
No, that's amazing. I like that too. Well, this has been really great. I think we've covered like quite a slew. Can we just list them? So like NFTs, social tokens, Moloch style DAOs. So like DAOs that you're paying to essentially enter or contributing sweat equity to enter, holding tokens for access to subscriptions or unique opportunities, yield farming and the rise of Wi-Fi. And then you just mentioned one that I'm blanking on now.
Audius, I guess, is a good one to keep in there.
Audius, of course, and then retroactive airdrops as well, as far as mechanisms go within the crypto industry that are actually available today. I kind of think that covers the majority of it. I mean, the only thing that we didn't touch on is like diving into like the different voting mechanisms that people are playing with. But honestly, those are quite niche and only really being applied in like deep crypto areas, right?
Yeah. And I'll kind of even add on to that and say that like I've found that people joining a Discord server is a big thing. Like people are like, what is Discord? Holy shit, I'm in a channel with other people. Like that's super exciting. And so I've been really trying to take a step back from like, where is the rest of the world at? Like we're just heads down, just driving for like 3 years now. Like when we come up from air, like how do people interact with this? I noticed that most new users use their phone to start using crypto for the first time. Like they'll send me their MetaMask on mobile. I've never used a mobile wallet once in my life, right? And like that learning curve is really interesting to note. And I think it offers a lot of really valuable feedback for how we go from where we are today, all being really passionate about this, to actually allowing these ideas to disseminate on a much more broad level.
That is really interesting. Yeah, no, I love that. And definitely something to continue to keep track of and be aware of. And I hope, I hope that, it's fine for many people to kind of just invest and be okay with investing and getting a Coinbase. But I'm really, really excited about people who want to dive in a little bit more and actually participate within the ecosystem, because the cultural aspect of the more decentralized space, I mean, it is just mind-blowing a bit, right? Like it opens up a whole different world, which I think too, I mean, it's really interesting that you kind of came to this world of Ethereum specifically, because I don't really see that in any other ecosystem. But you came to that out of a sort of curiosity about blockchain and crypto in general, and then you just migrated, or you gravitated very naturally toward the Ethereum developer meetups because you found those people to be distinct.
Yeah, the most engaged, right? And I think that's what I look for, is like, it's not about how much money people are making. It's like, how much do they deeply care about this? And to make a direct correlation to NFTs, you could be the biggest artist in the world with 10 million followers, but if you don't genuinely care about the drop that you're doing, about like what NFTs stand for, about community, like I'm never going to buy your assets, right? Like I want to collect culture and I want to collect things that advance the space as a whole. So that's kind of what, when I'm working with these artists on their creator economies, I really try and train the mental model that it's not about making $1 million on Nifty Gateway in 7 minutes. It's about how do you set yourself up for a 5-year horizon where your biggest fans can directly capture your upside. And when you start to see that click in people's minds, like they get very inspired, and it starts to be some really exciting work that also has a ton of potential as well.
I love that. That's amazing. And yeah, and that timeline is really important to hammer in, where this space is really, it's really, the incentives are geared for short-term gains, right? And that short-term like dopamine hit of, oh, we found a 10x, coin. But the long-term I mean, if we want this tech to be valuable for the future of society and to actually make a change in the world, these short-term gains they don't mean anything, right? At the end of the day.
To get a little bit esoteric for a second, I think it's fascinating to recognize that you can create value out of thin air. Like, this has been my biggest learning working in crypto, is that we're predisposed to think that the only value in the world is ones that's created by other people. But every creator in the world is a startup. This concept of creator equity is not too difficult to manufacture anymore with the existence of social tokens and NFTs. And so for me, I've been very intentional to double down on creators that want to explore this, because I believe over the next 1 to 2 years, investing in creators and kind of finding ways to make value out of fans and communities is going to drastically disrupt what we think about when it comes to Series A companies or deep financial products with profit and losses. It's value is whatever people ascribe it to be, and you can make value by having shared beliefs. You don't need to have a 100-person organization for something to be considered valuable.
That's amazing. I love that. I think that's actually a great place to leave off, unless you want to chat about anything else.
Perfect, man. I mean, I think we touched on a lot. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, it was super good. It was quite compact, very dense. I think people will be able to kind of review this a few times and to get all of it if they're new to crypto. Well, dude, thank you for sitting with me. I really appreciate it and appreciate the work that you do.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me.
If you want to explore more and deepen your understanding of cryptocurrency concepts and mechanisms available today, please visit our Gitbook or Crypto Encyclopedia. You can find it on our website at square1.tech. Thanks for listening.